Hi everyone, my name is Corey and welcome to the Gamble Studio. Today we're going to take a look at the single row function in Elevate. Now single rows can be used for borders, for sashings, and all sorts of other things on the quilt. With just the touch of your finger on the Elevate tablet, you can make it happen. So let's get started. Alrighty, so what we're going to do now here that we're with the machine and the Elevate tablet is we're going to look at the single row function. So if we come over to the tablet, we can look and see we've got block, single row, and edge to edge on the tablet. I'm going to go ahead and tap on single row, and it's going to ask me to mark out the boundary representing the stitchable area for the pattern. Move the machine head to each of the four corners of the boundary and press add point. Now one thing to note about single row is that it is a maximum of 4 points that you can click. Okay, so from right here we're going to do this top purple single row of our fabric, and I'm going to start here at the bottom left would be fine. It doesn't matter which order you click them in as long as you have those four. So I'm going to click add point on the tablet, and I'm going to move the machine head all the way down here to the right side. Tap add point. I'm going to come up here to the upper right of this sashing and tap add point. Come over here to the upper left of this one and tap add point. Okay, and as you saw, as soon as I tap that last point, just like in edge to edge, it goes ahead and closes off the boundary for us and then takes us into our pattern manager where we can choose which pattern we want. So I'm just going to look here, and I want to do this border one. So this Lionel border, so I'm going to tap on that. So once we are at this screen, you can see that little orange check mark. Now the orange check mark, and you'll see it throughout the software, is going to be more or less your OK or your continue to the next step. So if I tap on that orange check mark, you can see that it's basically loading the pattern in right now, and Elevate is going to choose what it thinks would be the best amount of repeats for this space. So currently I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 repeats. So if I want to increase or decrease the amount of repeats that I have, I can go into my edit screen. So at the bottom left-hand side of the tablet, you'll see edit. So we're going to tap on edit, and it's going to bring us into the function where we can do a little bit of editing. So you can see it says 7 repeats. So if I want to increase the amount of repeats, I can press the plus button, and it's going to increase them. Or if I want to decrease the amount of repeats, it will decrease them. Now, if you'll notice on the screen, what's really cool about Elevate is it's keeping it within that boundary for us. So just because I'm adding repeats doesn't mean that I have to then go and resize everything back down. Elevate's taking care of all those calculations for us. So 7 repeats is fine. I like the way that that looks. I do notice though, kind of on the top of the screen, and I'll zoom in a little bit for you, is that this is kind of sticking outside of the boundary in some points. And the reason that it's doing that is that it was trying to fit everything in at one spot. So you can see over here on the right that it has fit it on the right-hand side, but as you go a little bit to the left, it's sticking out a little bit. So that has to do a little bit with the piecing. So if I want to come in and fix that so I know that it's going to stay stitching within my boundary, right here I have resize at the bottom left of the screen. I'm going to tap resize. And what I can do is I have now these 9 little orange circles that appear over the first repeat, okay? And what I can do is, let's do this bottom middle one right here, and I'm going to tap and hold and bring that up and in, and you see that it's doing it symmetrically. So whatever it does on the bottom, it's going to do it to the top as well. So it's keeping everything nice and consistent for us, so we know that the spacing is going to be the same throughout the quilting. So I can use that one again. If I want to zoom in a little bit to be a little bit more precise, I can. A little bit of a tap and hold to just move it around where I want. And I can zoom around the screen. I can pan around the screen just by touching with my finger and moving the screen around. And everything there looks good. I like the way that that looks. You can also rotate the individual repeats themselves. So if you want to rotate the repeats, you can rotate them just like so. Now you can see that you've got these little green and red markers. Now that represents your start, so green represents the start of the pattern, and red represents the end of the pattern. So you'll always be able to tell if anything is not connected or it won't stitch continuously if you see a bunch of those markers on the screen like we do now. So I can continue rotating it around until I get that desired look that I want. You can also flip the row itself vertically. So if you want to change kind of the direction or the way that the pattern looks, you can flip it vertically by tapping the flip vertical icon. So you can see it just kind of gives it a little bit of a different look. Depending on what you're going for, you can use that as well. And then you can, of course, move it tiny, tiny increments in the move screen and then tapping it with the arrows on the screen to move it exactly in place where you want it to be. So then the last and final thing in the edit screen that you can do is you can also change the pattern. So you can say, you know what, the pattern looks good, but that's not the one that I want to go with. Let's go with a different pattern. So instead of having to re-click out all those points, we can come right over here to our add pattern icon, tap on that, and it's going to take us back to our pattern manager. Now I do like this pattern, so I'm not going to worry about changing it, but then you can tap on an additional pattern if you'd like, and then go into the edit function and edit it around if you'd like. But I'm just going to go ahead and go back to what I was doing. And let me check my resizing again. Maybe I want to resize this a little bit more. Just like that. I like the way that that looks. Maybe I can move it just a tiny bit more, just to put it exactly where I want it to be. Okay, and then we see that little orange check mark again. Now remember, that means that's that OK or continue to the next function icon. So I'm going to tap on that. And that's going to take us to our stitching screen where we can look at so that's where we saw the edit function. Okay. We also have a virtual stitch out. So if you want to see the path that the pattern is going to take before it starts stitching, you can tap on virtual stitch out. And you'll see that the pattern is turning red where it's been stitched technically, and black is what it has to do. So you can kind of see the path of how this pattern is going to stitch out before you start stitching it if you'd like. We're going to go ahead and stop that virtual stitch out. If you'd also like to see the needle off, so the machine kind of just moving around without it stitching, to see the path to make sure it's not going to go over any edges or go over any of that applique that you have, you can turn the needle on or off to do that as well. You'll also see on the screen there is a circle with a green plus sign. That is your crosshairs. Now you'll hear that terminology throughout the industry along with throughout the software and the manual. Now what your crosshair is, that is where the machine is on the quilt at this point in relation to the patterns on the screen. Okay? So what I'm ready to do is I'm actually ready to go ahead and start stitching. So I'm going to go ahead and tap on start. And the machine is going to move to its starting point. It's going to take a single stitch and ask me to pull up the bobbin thread. So I'm going to pull up that bobbin thread and I'm going to hold both the top and the bobbin, okay? And I'm going to tap continue. The machine is going to take some tie-off stitches. And then it's going to start stitching away. Now if I'd like to trim my threads, I can tap pause on the screen. The machine will pause. I can come over here and trim my threads away and hit resume. And it's not like I planned this or anything. The bobbin has run out. And so what happens is when your bobbin runs out, Elevate is going to warn you that there is a thread break, okay? So it says alert, thread break. A thread break has been detected. Fix and touch OK to continue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to touch OK. Okay? So when you touch that, you can see that the machine is still locked in place, okay? We're going to tap on the words restart at the bottom left of the screen. And now you can see that the machine is free for me to move. So I'm going to go ahead and trim any threads away on the top that I've got, if any of them are sticking up. And I'm going to move the machine over to the side so I can change out my bobbin. So I've got a new bobbin, and I'm going to place this back in to the machine. I want to hear that click so I know that it's locked in. I'm going to bring the machine back over. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to find where the machine stopped stitching, okay, where the thread stopped stitching, okay. So I'm going to go to where the thread stopped, and I'm going to put my laser light right over where that thread stopped, and I'm actually going to do it a couple of stitches before the thread actually broke, okay. And the reason that I'm doing that is when Elevate is ready to begin its tie-off process again, what it's going to do is it's going to tell the machine to take some tie-off stitches at the beginning, and that's going to lock those threads that were loose back down. So if you go a couple stitches beforehand, it's going to lock those threads, and you're not going to have worries of those threads coming out later on down the road. So I've put those put the machine a couple stitches before the thread broke, and at the bottom left of the screen, I'm going to tap on Resume Stitching here. I'm going to tap on that, and you'll see my little orange check mark pop up. So I'm going to tap on that. I'm going to tap the word Resume. The machine's going to take a single stitch. I'm going to pull up my bobbin thread and my top thread. I'm going to hold them, and I'm going to press Continue. I can pause the machine to cut my threads, tap Resume, and just like that, I've recovered from a thread break or a bobbin run out. Super, super fast and super simple. Alright, so we are pulling up to the last few stitches. So what it's going to do is it's going to do its tie-offs at the very end. Alright, and it's going to tell us that the stitching has completed, and to pull up the bobbin thread and press Continue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my machine, move it to the left, grab the top thread, move it back to the right, right over where it ended stitching, take a single stitch, move it back off to the left, and you'll see that bobbin thread pull up with it. I'm going to trim all the threads that I see. And there we go. It's just that easy. So whenever I'm done, I can press Continue. And if I want to move on to another project, another row, another piece of sashing, I can tap End Project, tap End. It's brought me back to my pattern mode screen, and I can tap on Single Row and start again. Thank you so much for joining me today and learning a little bit more about the single row function in Elevate. I'll see you next time. Bye.